Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. Today is Sunday, July 21st, 2024, and we are going to kick off today's podcast with an update on the Janel Grant case, where there was a slight update in the last week where Janel Grant filed a pre-complaint action. Essentially, it's a petition where she's requesting medical records from a clinic, Dr. Carlin Kolker, and his clinic Peak Wellness, where she's saying that she was, as a former WWE employee, treated by Dr. Kolker, and that her medical records don't match the medical records and billing that she has. She's essentially requesting paper documents. The paper documents that she's been given so far are not fulfilling the needs that she has for the federal lawsuit. And as part of her federal lawsuit, she claimed, or as part of her civil lawsuit against Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and WWE, Janel Grant claimed that she was treated by an unnamed doctor at an unnamed clinic. And it would suggest, this particular legal action would suggest that that was Carlin Kolker and Peak Wellness, and that she received adrenal trays or adrenal supplement trays, and she was not fully given information on what pills or medications she was taking, what the substances were, and that when she pushed back and asked Dr. Kolker about what he was giving her, he said, "If you don't trust me, we have bigger problems." And I want to say thank you so much to Post Wrestling and Brandon Thurston and John Pollock for their write-up of this, which is where we're getting our information from today. So Vince McMahon and his attorneys' pushback on this is that the federal lawsuit's paused so that Janel Grant and her lawyer, Ann Callis, should not be doing any further action on it. But, this is not... Ann Callis responded by saying they did not violate the federal stay by filing this petition against a non-defendant requesting records. So, Trish, clearly this case is ongoing, even as the federal authorities are still looking into it as a criminal case. It's nice to see that there's still something happening here, and this obviously is sketchy as hell. Any thoughts on this as it's moving forward?
No, as you said, there's still kind of 4 months left on the stay that they have for the civil court case for the federal investigation. This was filed in state court, which is the way they're kind of saying they're getting around it. So it was not filed as part of the current case, and it was not filed in the same level of court. It amazes me, by the way, how your US court system works, where not everything is in the same jurisdiction. You can file things in different jurisdictions and mean different things. It's very different. But, so the statement from the McMahon side does not deny that Dr. Kolker is the celebrity doctor mentioned in the lawsuit itself. So it's a fair assumption to make, but it is important to note that at the moment that is still an assumption. The petition also claims that Dr. Kolker was aware of the NDA between Janel Grant and Vince McMahon. There was no comment from Dr. Kolker or Peak Wellness, which Post Wrestling did approach for as such. So this is a ongoing thing. I think if someone wants to look at this, I think it would, if we look at this as a case of coercion, this would be something that could potentially play in. But at the current time, this is just a request for medical documents in its current sense. But it is something, it's just ongoing, something to keep an eye on, and it is something we should keep updated on. And if you do want to follow, and we should, this was the most important individual in wrestling in the last 40 years. And this is a culture that needs to change. Then you can keep up through Post Wrestling, who are leading on this. You can also there's a good write up this week in the Observer newsletter as well. So don't rely on aggregators or other people's opinions or anything else. Try and read as much of the actual information as possible. We just want to keep this updated. Something that we've followed since the start and we think is important. So I think it was right to lead off. In terms of TKO, WWE. This is something else that's ongoing. They've now got the Conley antitrust lawsuit kind of back in play after a settlement was made. The judge does not want to ratify it. I don't think there's been an update to that every time I've checked.
No, it doesn't. I don't think the most recent was that the judge had a hearing but was still reluctant to move forward with the settlement, which is rare in the U.S. but does occur.
Yeah, and we have the lawyer for the complainants that brought the lawsuit saying that potentially, like, if they don't award this settlement, they could go to court and they could win. However, it would likely be chucked out by the Supreme Court, which feels absolutely insane, but is just...
They're doing whatever they want these days.
Indeed. But we've also seen Linda McMahon back in public this week at the Republican National Convention. So they are the updates in terms of through the courts. But I think something that has kind of come up recently and that people have started to notice in recent weeks is how they have an on-screen storyline in WWE that has mirrored elements of this case.
Yes.
So
yes.
Jesse Collins wrote an excellent article on Voices of Wrestling this week around this. So you have the Dominic Mysterio, Liv Morgan storyline where Morgan is aggressively pursuing Dominic Mysterio and has included things such as Dominic showing text messages to other members of the locker room, which mirrors an exact part of the lawsuit. So there is a thing about this, and I think there is part of this could be part of a strategy. So they will obviously deny it and just say it's part of their storyline, and as a storyline within itself, is it strictly offensive? No, but it's, I don't think you can deny the timing. I think it'd be very difficult to deny the timing. The other thing that it does is that it messes up kind of, if people were to search for WWE in a lawsuit or to search for in particular things that happen like this, the results will now be mixed in with this storyline.
Yes.
So it dilutes the results, it dilutes, especially if you were to search for the text messages, which are, probably the prime bit of evidence currently from the complainant, it would now be mixed in with this, and that feels like very much a strategy, and that it's kind of thing that kind of makes you feel a little bit sick, to be honest. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, listen, I'm going to be upfront and say that my knowledge of this storyline comes from recaps on Wrestling Observer Radio, right? I'm not watching WWE. I've maybe seen a couple clips here and there as people posted it. I do think that it is much more likely that this is a way to try to keep these headlines unsearchable or less searchable. But I also think that it's kind of a statement on how, you're going to do a harassment storyline where the dude is being harassed. And it just reminds me of the movie, was it Presumed Innocent? There was a movie that came out with Demi Moore and what's his name? Freaking in 93, and it was sexual harassment in a movie, and it was the woman doing the sexual harassing, because it's otherwise it would be too on the nose, people might not want to watch it. It's just, I don't know, people who dislike the timeless Toni Storm storyline and the three-way love affair between Mina, Mariah, and Toni have tried to say, well, this is, it's just like this and they're the same thing. And I don't know. I think, like I said, I'm not watching it, and it's certainly possible that it is a bastion of progressive sexual whatever. But I think I'm always raise an eyebrow anytime you make a man a centerpiece of a woman's storyline, right? Especially in wrestling where men and women don't fight each other, and I think from everything I understand about the storyline, it's people fighting over Dominic Mysterio, which, hey, I understand it's Rat Boy Summer. But it's just, should I give WWE the benefit of the doubt? I don't think I should. It's hard to see that they're going to tackle any difficult storyline in any kind of, thoughtful or interesting way. But most of their women's storylines lately, and, we saw this with Rhea Ripley when she was the women's champion, she didn't really defend the belt. Her storyline was being head of Judgment Day, right? And again, where she couldn't have matches, she wasn't fighting these guys. The same thing seems to be happening with Liv Morgan. Like, how many times has she defended the belt? And have those, defenses been anything involved? Have the storylines about those defenses been as important as the romance with Dom Mysterio? I don't know. The whole thing is just weird. Doesn't make me feel great. I don't look at it and think, geez, this is going to be fantastic. But like I said, I'm not exactly watching it, and I don't really want to, make assumptions about something I haven't seen.
Fair enough. I look at it and I think it's an effort to discredit, some of this testimony. It definitely plays up to the portrayal that Vince McMahon gave in his his defense. They have a track record of taking things that, especially where they feel they've been quote unquote attacked, stand up for WWE, etc., of taking the people that they feel are the the people kind of behind this, and making them into kind of caricatures or kind of really kind of ripping into them. I've botched about 5 words there, but hey, it's what it is.
I got the gist.
Yeah, got the gist. No, but they have this saying that, there's been numerous things in the past where they have done that. So it is a repeated behaviour, not a different one. And that's always what's going to kind of raise suspicion. But yeah, we'll see what they do with it. They've got, obviously, Rhea Ripley is back now, but yeah, it's not something that, it doesn't feel very positive for me. I think it feels backwards. They've had a lot of, I will say for WWE, they've had a lot of kind of powerful female characters in a different way. It's like it felt like they progressed in the last 5 to 10 years, definitely in the last 10 years, Jesus Christ. And this feels like a regression. So,
I mean, that's kind of been the case with a lot of their storyline stuff. And it's something that is, getting tiptoed around in discussions, but nobody's really come out and talked about, Shelton, MVP had all that stuff on Instagram where he pointed out that, they could have put the Hurt Business back together again, but didn't. And somebody else was like, you're not seeing a lot of, black men as champions in Triple H's WWE. And he was like, pretty much, yeah. And if you search for MVP Instagram screenshots, you'll find them. I mean, there's been a lot of comment about the fact that, like, most of the factions in WWE seem to be based around what race you are. There's not a lot of intermingling there. There's stuff about the ad breaks and the way things were set up during WrestleMania in terms of, like, the on-screen, the advertisements they had in ring during some of the stuff, which I'm sure somebody will be happy to point out as synergy or whatever the heck we're calling it now.
That's the one.
Yeah, synergy, right? Yeah, I know everybody's really into that. But it's just one of those things where, again, WWE continues to get the benefit of the doubt. Nobody really wants to question it or talk about it. Nobody really wants to get into it or discuss it. Everything's great, and, they're doing great business. So you can't criticize them. And it just continues to be frustrating, I think, as we march through this summer.
We'll see what the fall brings. This case will kind of become more prominent at that point, and it's a federal investigation that will kick in then as well. And it's it's a key time for them because they're moving to USA in September. They are gearing up for a Netflix move. They've just got John Cena back for that. It just shows you for all the talk about kind of current draws, what they feel like they need for that. It's kind of an interesting alternative viewpoint on that. So, it's it'll be a busy year, and that in mind, one of the things they are doing is we're seeing increased movement of what Mark Shapiro talked about last year of moving to more destination shows. There is a report that Survivor Series will be at the Intuit Dome opposite the SoFi Stadium in SoFi in just outside of Los Angeles on November 30th. It's a new venue that's opening very shortly, and they are not running any US house shows so far advertised in quarter 3 and quarter 4, their new date announcements. And this is what they spoke about last year, is that these kind of low-income house shows will be eradicated, and that's what we're seeing. So we're seeing, there's a European tour in November, because that is a key kind of vein of income for them, and also, it's somewhere where they can kind of stranglehold the market as well, where they still have that AEW threat. Obviously, that plays into kind of neutering all-in ticket sales as much as they possibly can by announcing them when they did. But there are no domestic US dates, and this year, they've gone from 46 house shows or live events, whatever you want to call them, in the first half of last year to 35 this year, with 50 television events. So it's quite a dramatic change. It will mean that their idea of it is that everything is a destination.
Yes.
So they have... How many domestic US pay-per-views this year? So WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Bad Blood, the new one, that's the arena in Georgia, and now Survivor Series. So they run 4 domestic US pay-per-views. Only one of them is in an arena. So the idea is, and it's the same with TV now, so if you remove the house show element, then the idea is that you will travel in to see television. And that increases the rate of likelihood of you being able to kind of adopt the kind of site fee thing, which is what they want for everything. Yes. So they want every single live event to have a site fee for TV. We've seen some television incorporated into site fees where they've been mixed in with the WrestleMania events in Indianapolis, or mixed in with UFC events. I think there was one just recently in Louisville that was like a joint between the two, Friday, Saturday, SmackDown, and the UFC pay-per-view. So the next way of incorporating that is to increase that demand for the arenas, and this may play a part of it. I think it also reduces, potentially the injury rate. We've seen some awful injuries at house shows. Seth Rollins gets hurt at house show, I think, every year, bless him. That's been happening for like a decade. I feel like it's happened for a decade. Like Seth Rollins, oh shit, he's dead at a house show. So that will reduce that. And from a working perspective, it gives them... It re-establishes kind of an advantage over AEW now, who have the 2 shows where a lot of people work both shows, so they won't need to have people on the road. You're out one day a week, so that advantage that AEW started with is now eradicated, and for talent they will be paid more. So in a way that Collision, you do an extra day and you're getting paid the same with an AEW contract when that came in, and the challenges that's provided. You're going to do the opposite now in WWE, because when they go to house shows, talent don't get hotels and transport provided in the way that they do in AEW. So that's now one lesser expense. So there are benefits to this system. They're going to lose something in terms of people being able to gain experience and get through quicker. And, that whole kind of match preparation, it's always been kind of key to their system, but in general it probably is a better thing for their business. It's probably a better thing for wrestler longevity. It's not great for someone as a fan.
No.
But there's less and less things involved that seem to matter when it comes to the actual fan base. So
yeah,
there we are.
It'll be interesting in that there was relatively recently there was that planted story about how WWE wrestlers are not shocked at the injury rate in AEW, given how rarely the AEW wrestlers wrestle, which is funny when you talked about it'll be better for injury rates with less house shows, but
theoretically.
That's a planted story.
There's a weird balance on that, you kind of want to be working regularly enough that your body's still kind of in sort of working shape, and the tendency is when you don't work very often. Sometimes in AEW we see people wrestle less than 20 matches a year, big TV people. So then you want to do absolutely everything to get over in those moments, so it puts more pressure on that. You probably have less of that in WWE. Most people wrestle each week or every other week. But yeah, it's a weird balance. I'm not sure. I can't determine what the balance is, but yeah, for their business, this is what they think is right going forward. And their next card is SummerSlam in Cleveland. And what I think is really interesting about this is they're currently at 47,000. Cleveland Brown Stadium has a capacity of 67,431. I think Dave wrote in the Observer that a full house would be around 62,000. I think that's hugely unlikely, but there's this interesting thing that I think that outside of WrestleMania, these stadium shows aren't sellouts.
No.
So SummerSlam last year, Ford Field, I think they announced 59,194. The actual was 51,477 with 47,000 paid, $8.5 million gate, average ticket price $180. So that was their biggest SummerSlam ever in terms of gross and US domestically. And we've seen one in Nashville, and we've seen Money in the Bank in Vegas. And it's kind of interesting. So we have all this talk about All In and how much that should do. And I think, they're hampered by the fact they're going against last year's gate and the size of Wembley Stadium, and also the expectation of Wembley Stadium being that it does like a 72,400 average and 500 average even, and the limited dates that are available there. But we talk about this as in something a failure, a success, but this is considered a huge success at 47,000. And it probably will overtake Detroit from last year. So that's enough, apparently, for Cleveland. They paid $1.6 million for this show. It's crazy, isn't it? $1.6 million
ridiculous
to hold a show. But it does make me think when we hit the prospect this week. I'm skipping some bits, so you're going to kill me, but we'll come back to the rest. When you see about the prospect of a US pay-per-view stadium show for AEW, that the marker is somewhat set at trying to do a similar number to All In, and yet every show outside of WrestleMania that WWE do, the success marker is between kind of 40 and 50,000.
But that's how things have been going lately, right? Like, if they don't blow WWE out of the water, it's not a success. And if it's not a success, it's a failure. There's no middle ground with AEW right now. You're either, huge success, total failure. And, some of it is the way that, and I think, we certainly try with this, but some of it's the way that folks talk about this. And I know, let's be honest, God love him, Dave Meltzer's a huge a huge issue with this. WWE is hot right now. WWE is hot right now. It's hard to be in second place. It's a constant refrain we hear every week over and over again. And yet, there's not really an evaluation of the metrics of this middle. We talked about some of these middling pay-per-views. Was it Backlash? Elimination Chamber didn't sell out, and that was in freaking Australia, right? You would have thought that one would have been a lot more popular than it was. Didn't have high Google Trend searches. They didn't talk aggressively about how big the pay-per-view purchases or watches were for that one. Backlash, was that another one? Like, they've had a lot of these middling pay-per-views that haven't seemed to have a lot of interest or done particularly well lately. And SummerSlam has 5, maybe 6 matches on the card total right now? Are they going to add that many more?
The selling point for SummerSlam, though, is a Roman Reigns return. It's not the matches. So, if they're going to run Drew McIntyre and CM Punk, they've been building that feud for 7 months now.
Jesus Christ.
No, but... we'll talk about that one later, but it's, it can be excessive in terms of kind of stealing away from the heel, but to their fan base, they're into that match.
Yes.
But the thing though, the thing that it's really been sold on is we're doing Cody and Solo Sikoa, which is as poor a main event as the Jey Uso Roman Reigns one last year that was played out to near enough silence. And, it's the Roman return. That is their big money thing coming up before they even get to Cena. It's the Roman Reigns, this guy that they tried for desperately for years, and after fucking up the timing, which we will discuss later, to make him into this key babyface. And now after this hugely successful heel run, he is going to have that babyface run. He is going to be the top babyface in the company. Even with Cena, even with Cody, he will be the top babyface in the company when he returns. And how that plays in, there's a lot of names. There's a lot of names for that door to manage, isn't there? It's going to be an interesting thing to watch. Egos are going to clash there at some point, but I just think it's interesting how we talk about it. So they will likely, in the way that they market and the way they market late and distribute, I'm sure they'll be over the 51,000 from last year in Detroit, but it's not like we're talking about these shows as comparison as stadium sellouts. And I think that's kind of important when we talk about All In and we talk about future numbers. Should we just talk about the stadium thing now? Because I've just roped into it. I just roped into it. So Fightful put out a report that AEW could be looking into a show on par, quote, with the biggest shows that they've ever done, and use a picture. You could, they say, oh, it's just like this and that. They used a picture of AT&T. Like, come on now, like, get over it. And it makes sense. So you've got the current run of what are they called? They're just a run at the esports arenas in Arlington, which is
the residency.
Right, residency, thank you. God, I have got no words today. We're doing good. The residency at the esports arena in Arlington, next to the ballpark, and 500 meters away from the ballpark, you have AT&T Stadium, one of the biggest arenas in America. And I thought about this. So I do like the suggestion that they should call it Y'all. Yeah, Y'all. I can't say it. Fucking hell.
Y'allin.
Y'allin. I need to go into my country voice now. Like, y'all. I've been to Texas. I got boots. What do you want? But yeah, I like that suggestion. But there is I think that's kind of an interesting prospect, and I don't think that it's completely out of hand. So I was listening to Dave Meltzer on Friday say, they could do 20 or 30,000, and I think that's a hugely low estimate. So there is a few things that kind of come and be involved in this, and it's like, I don't expect that Arlington would pay them, the $2.7 million that they paid WWE for WrestleMania 32 in 2016. I don't think you're going to see that. But even if they gave them free use of the venue, transport, if they dressed the city up, they did for WrestleMania, where like the whole city felt like, and you won't get this at Wembley. London's very much like New York. It's too, it's too big. You've got the tube posters that went up a couple of weeks ago and the buses and things, but that's it. That's all you're going to see, and it's very much like New York. Whereas like downtown Dallas was completely kind of covered in WrestleMania. So if you are trying to sell your brand and to market your brand to third parties, TV, whatever that may be, having something like that and showing your impact with an agreement with the city, who get what they get plenty out of it. I think WrestleMania 32. I've been writing my research today, by the way. WrestleMania 32, they said that average fans stay 3.9 nights, and it generated $25 million for hotels within the Metroplex area, and that the economic impact created $8.4 million in spend in restaurants and 1,550 full-time jobs for the area. So the city gets a huge amount if you run over a few days, if there's follow-up events, there's plenty of places to do that. And Dallas is an incredibly well-located city in terms of like that. But even if you get the tax breaks and you get the use of the venues and you get the marketing, that is going to be so much less outlay than what you get for running Wembley. Yes. Even with the friends and the deals that Tony has with Wembley. And when you look at Wembley this year, we spoke about it last time, that the kind of first weekend was kind of 25,000, and they're kind of sat around. WrestleTix says 41, they say 45, but there's been no kind of predominant movement. And you don't have that kind of first-time effect. Whereas if you run here, this is a location that people like. It's a location that drives, ticket purchases within its local area. And that was a difference between WrestleMania 32 in Dallas that did, 80,000. Oh, God, this is a complicated one, isn't it? 80,709 in its turnstile count, because that's something you can keep in mind, right? I would run this stadium. Even though I like the ballpark better and I like the sightlines in the ballpark better, I would run this stadium because of that number. Think about how much, this is how spiteful I am. This is how you do it, right? So all this shit about turnstile count last year at Wembley, because the turnstile count was 72,265, and they said, turnstile count WrestleMania 32 was 87,009. That would give me a reason to do it, because then you play into people's tribalist natures. And as much as we probably shouldn't play into their tribalist natures, I think that absolutely would. I think they could easily do, a SummerSlam number in this sort of venue, 40, 50,000 just off playing into that. And when I look at Wembley and the prospect of doing it next year, and even with kind of Brent Council increasing the amount of events, or hoping to increase the amount of events from 46 to 54 allowed at Wembley, because Wembley has not just a curfew, which also you wouldn't have in Arlington.
No.
But also has an event limit. So there is a huge amount of competition for these slots. And, the venue's got an average, attendance of 72,500 and the Jags are playing their games at Tottenham. Your leverage is much lessened if you're delivering kind of 55,000, which is a great number. It's not to say the number isn't successful, but is it enough to run Wembley? And it wasn't for the Challenge. I'm a rugby league fan. It wasn't for the Challenge Cup. They moved to Tottenham for 3 years. So I do think that it would be a good option. And I think if they did do it, I don't think there would be a Wembley show. What do you think?
No. I think it's doable. I think it's very hard right now to envision it because, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit more. Like, from a personal perspective, I'm, as deflated in some ways about the on-screen product. So it's hard it's hard to summon the excitement for something like this. I think it is doable. I think you are right in terms of the amount of benefit that they would get from working with the municipality. From obviously they're going to get some level of assistance, whether it's they've clearly got a relationship with the city already, as they've shown from the residency and all that other stuff. And if they're managed to fill the esports stadium and get a decent deal on that, that's a positive too. But I agree with you that it is doable, and there's no reason why they shouldn't go after it. I think you would have a lot of people that would travel in for something like this, and Dallas is an extremely accessible city. It's not difficult to get to from most places in the U.S. because it's a major airport and all that other stuff. But it's hard to think about it right now. Like, I think they could do those numbers, and I think there's no reason I think they couldn't. But like I said, it's tough to envision right now. Given kind of where they're at creatively.
I think it would be adventurous. And I did some reading up on WrestleMania 32 because I was thinking about it a lot. I attended that WrestleMania. But I was thinking about how much they struggled the year previously at WrestleMania 31 in Levi Stadium over in California, and how much, and the reasons behind that, and how even though their ratings were falling the next year, and there was a lot of feedback around the bad build for the show. Ultimately, it wasn't a show that knocked anything out the park. I think most people would say that NXT on the Friday night was a much better show with the Nakamura-Zayn match on it. But the location and the thing of being in that stadium was a draw in itself. It seemed to counteract the issues that people were having with the booking and with the kind of the things that were going on in the company. So I think it would be very adventurous, and there are some things that would need to change in order to do that. But the idea of having that first stadium show in the US may well be enough, and I definitely think that it would be more of a prospect than going back to Wembley for a third year in a row to diminishing returns. Because whenever you look at it, that's what you're going to get. That's just the nature. It's just the nature of how things go.
I think that they do need to mix it up. I think running Wembley, Tony Khan loves his traditions, but I think as much as we all love the electric atmosphere of Wembley Stadium, I think the challenge is creating and keeping that level of excitement for a show that you go back to year after year. And I think, doing something where you take that branding and that name and you apply it to a different location is not a bad idea. And I do think you think back to the excitement of when they ran Arthur Ashe for the first time, and that size venue and how people were so excited for that show. And I think you could do something very similar. But I agree with you that if they are going to do that in Texas, they really get one bite at a stadium show, I think, a year as of right now. I think you can't justify doing two.
No, and I think the move location would be helpful as well in terms of expectations, shall we say. This thing that we have to have a hometown guy do this and that. Like,
oh my God. Let's
get rid of that, and this is one of the best ways of doing that as well. Dustin Rhodes for the world title, let's do that. He might not even be there. His contract's up in September. He might not even be there.
He's been retiring for like a while though, right? Like,
But no. So the thing. So I saw Tony say we weren't applying to do anything for the foreseeable and near future, and I thought that was clever wordplay, because what I wouldn't do is kind of publicise that you absolutely are doing this, considering how much WWE were able to counter all in this year with a series of European pay-per-views and house show tours, and really kind of like flood the market. So I probably wouldn't give away when I'm doing something, or or how big I'm doing something right now. So I thought that was kind of wise, and they got a lot on their plate, because not only that, you've got negotiations with WBD, and I think we'll talk about the NBA stuff, but I think in terms of the deal being, done in principle or close or anything like that, I think we should just follow the Brandon Thurston thing of until this deal is signed now, considering we've had these descriptions for like 6 months and we know what it is, I don't think I want to discuss like, oh, this could happen, that could happen. It's fucking pointless, right? We've been through every scenario that there is.
Everyone.
The key bit is that WBD are going to, it looks like, match for the NBA rights for the package that Amazon were due to be allocated, worth $1.8 million per year, and that their theory is that they are able to match that, even though it's not the package that they were originally on. Could end up in court. We will see. Amazon are going to offer, Bill Simmons said that Amazon are going to offer the billions now. So 1.8 billion, sorry. That's Dave, that. I'm reading Dave trying. But, so they are going to pay the money in the first few years, and, the presumption is that will lead to something that WBD can't do. However, it's kind of important that they are going to try and max that for not just their budgetary constraints, but also, the days of the week that things may fall, because the predominant day that may cover, if they do get the NBA in some form, if there's a reduced package made up of some things from the Amazon deal or some things from NBA TV, would predominantly be Thursday. So for people to think Collision might move to Thursday, that would then rule it out. So there's lots of kind of different things in play, but the NBA and WBD is the next thing. The other important part of that was that WBD are focusing on TV and reducing money to the Max platform. Yep. And they did make 1,000 layoffs on Thursday, as well as they continue internal cost cutting. So this is the kind of context that they are working within. But yeah, I don't want to. I'm not doing they could do this for the deal. It could have this. It could have that. There's fucking no point. Like, we don't do this. But it's and I think that's leading to, and we've discussed this previously, but I think that's leading to kind of a lot of the behaviour and the kind of there is some hot shotting, the Swerve Strickland Okada thing was a full hot shot. Like, come on,
big time. It worked.
It will,
Dynamite 250 worked.
Yeah. So the thing about that rating is, and I hate talking about individual ratings, but they promoted that match over the top of everything else for 3 weeks. Yep. The MJF and Will Ospreay one, and Max's demo that we identified with the Max and Cole stuff last year, the female 35 to 49, was the one that showed up. I think, looking at it, I've just tried to go back over it a couple of times. I think that was the highest number in that demo since March of 2022 for Dynamite. So they got a bigger lead in change. The week before was 0.13, this one was a 0.2. So that makes a huge difference as well. But his demo did turn up for this. So they can say that promoting the hell out of this match for 3 weeks did have an impact on the rating. In fact, something they've not done very often. No. I can't think of a match that they pushed that hard on TV for that long. I was trying to rack my brain. I can't think of anything this year that they've pushed that vigorously. And they definitely pushed it harder than kind of Blood and Guts this week.
Yeah.
Which will be an interesting rating because, they they made some interesting choices with Blood and Guts, and they've made some interesting choices in terms of what will be powering that rating and kind of not focusing on it. So the one number I'm really interested in this week would be female 18 to 34, but we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. I did get a question, so just before we skip on, because I'm just flying through topics, and sorry, I'm away with myself today. So we got a question from, did you say Puny? Is it Puny? Puny, yes. God, thank you. I need all the help I can get today, don't I? Jesus.
That's my job. That's why I'm here.
There's loads of numbers. I'm just so excited. Puny God on the Discord who asks, is there reasoning behind sometimes the overrun goes downward and sometimes it goes upward? Is there any programming reason or something? So I'll split this down into some different things. So the biggest kind of overruns we've seen outside of the Mercedes Mone appearance at the end of the 13th of March Dynamite, which did a 23% growth in the demo, have been when they have ran over into Rampage. So you have supplemental programming afterwards that keeps viewers more. And we saw a change in their general programming from Young Sheldon to Modern Family, but that's not really had any impact on the overrun. The other thing is the standard thing. So if you have 2 ad breaks, as in the case of that quarter hour with Mercedes I just mentioned there in quarter 8, and then none in the overrun, you are more likely to see an increase. But you also have to be mindful that at the start of quarter 8 will be a high percentage than what they generally end out after 2 ad breaks, with the impact of that at the end. So yeah, quarter ad breaks, key thing as you go in. That, and then, but in terms of, is there a correlation between how long the overrun is, or is there a correlation to kind of content? No, not really. There's no real correlation in terms of what drives something up and down. You could, this is staying the thing that we used to say with quarter 8 anyway. I think you have something that has stakes, that tends to do better, or a big angle. Not always though, but yeah, there's no real correlation. So if you have success in that kind of thing, you should kind of keep an eye on that. We saw the beatdown from Toni Storm from Mariah May did very well previous week. The Max beatdown on Garcia did not. So it's not an exact science, but I don't see any correlation or any reason behind like any special programming reason. We know where DVR kind of cuts off. Some cut off 2 minutes, some cut off later. But we're not seeing anything that would impact other than your general thing with your ad breaks and that sort of thing. So no, I don't think there's any correlation. Sometimes I think it's just content. But I do think the stakes, just like QA, is like a huge thing. So that's the answer to that one. Right. Do you want to talk about AEW first?
Yeah.
Come on, then. Come on, let's do it. Let's do it. And it's doing.
Hangman lost.
Oh, we're doing this first? Oh, shit.
Let's fucking go through it.
All right, okay.
Let's part of the all-in build. Let's part of the blood and guts all-in build where we're at.
Okay,
like
cool.
I feel like we need like a state of the promotion almost at this point. Yeah.
Okay.
So Hangman lost, which we said was going to happen, and we're sort of oddly doubted. And then once it occurred, we're sort of
still doubted.
Still doubted. We said Hangman is going to lose. Danielson is going to win. Okay, well you couldn't possibly have known that. You just got lucky.
I wish.
Jesus Christ, guys, come on.
Come on.
Yeah, that sometimes you're just like you just want to beat your head against the table, but whatever.
Yeah.
It was shitty. I don't know. Part of it is that I tend to go back and forth a little bit on this because I don't want to turn into a parody of myself, even though sometimes I think I already may be one.
Okay.
Did I want Hangman to win because I'm a fan? Hell fucking yes. Did I want Hangman to win because, for what seemed like about 5 days, it was the most exciting thing that had happened in AEW in a fucking dog's age? Oh, absolutely. It was the thing that everybody was talking about. It was the thing that everyone was excited over. And it ended by a weird fucking finish, where your babyface got help from the fake referee knockout thing with like an odd roll up from a guy who'd been beaten almost to death. And, it was somewhat deflating. I think those of us who were hoping it would go a different way were sort of deflated by it. It felt exciting. It felt fresh. It felt different. And it didn't go anywhere. That said, there are reasons for Bryan Danielson to have this match at Wembley. I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't. And I know that some of you listening, there are people who are huge Bryan Danielson fans who want to see him win a title, who want to see him have a title match at Wembley, and are all for it. And I don't want to negate or shit on you guys. Like, I'm happy for you. Enjoy it. I just enjoy it. I say it with all the love in my heart. I have a great time. It's the Catholic mother in me coming out. But I just think that, for me, it was one of those situations where it's like, why did this have to happen? Right? Because now we're in a weird situation where Swerve has to get out there and give a promo about respect for Bryan Danielson while also talking about blood and guts, right? So we have a blood and guts situation that's completely separate and totally unrelated to a title match a few weeks later. So Swerve has to build both of these things simultaneously, and didn't do either of them well, I don't think, but I also don't
No.
see how anybody could have. I don't think you can look at that promo and say that was a really good promo. You know, Swerve's given some damn good promos. That wasn't one of them. You know, you sort of oddly neutered Hangman, who just sort of wandered off to the back and was like, well, I guess I'll talk to the Young Bucks and have a stare down with Okada, right? We had this incredible heel character that now is kind of like, oh, I guess, well, yeah. Blood and Guts itself just feels like an afterthought. And, you know, in general, the build to All In on the men's side seems like an afterthought. It's just it's just flaccid. There's nothing to it. It's tough to watch in a way. And if it wasn't for the women's stuff, which is the only thing that I'm really getting excited about, you know, I don't know that there's really a lot on here that I'm like, wow, AEW's got this going on. And I think it's the same sort of situation that we saw a little bit in the spring where, you know, some of these programs by themselves are not bad, but the fact that there's nothing backing them up with any heat, you know, we got another situation where we had all this heat and the heat just disappeared, right? The heat just dissipated away. And the natural heat is just doused by either stuff that's going on inside AEW that they did intentionally to themselves or external stuff they can't control, like injuries, right? So now you also run the risk of having Swerve and Danielson sidelined by the Max Osprey stuff.
Well, that's happening already.
Right, we saw that happen this week, right? That's sort of taken over, which was a thing we were terribly afraid was going to happen once Swerve got the belt. Didn't happen, which was amazing. They put all that effort and energy into it. And, like, you know, Danielson won last week, and, you know, it was the greatest thing that ever happened. We had a couple follow-up video packages, but then the build this week has been all about Blood and Guts, which he's not even involved in or related to, which I get because he's, you know, physically defunct and whatever. But it just, the whole thing just seems extremely disjointed. And I think one of the problems that they're really suffering from right now is that, and I'm not naive enough to think that this isn't always the case, right? The schedule drives the story beats all the time. Let's not kid ourselves, right? You're driving to your big shows, you're driving to your pay-per-views, etc. But it feels like the seams on that are showing right now in a way that they haven't done before. It just feels like, well, we're having Blood and Guts because it's July and we have Blood and Guts in July. And we're having a big match for Wembley because we have a big match for Wembley. And we can't have a heel win in Wembley, so it has to be Danielson. And we're going to do like a recap of what we did with Sting because that was really successful. And that stuff for me, I don't have an issue with relying on nostalgia. I get why it's done. But I think the thing that frustrates me so much about AEW is that they're relying on other companies' nostalgia, right? The Danielson stuff, the Yes Chance, that's not AEW stuff. That didn't start in AEW, you know? So you're basically importing nostalgia from other promotions, right? And I don't know. I don't know why Tony Khan is so afraid of his own promotion's history and afraid of his own promotion's, like, beloved characters. You know, I would love to think that he was the one who said we should totally get Marco Stunt in here for Jack Perry's first defense. But you know he wasn't, right? Like, I don't say that for a fact, but I would be absolutely and completely shocked if that was his idea. So, I don't know. Like, that's kind of where I'm at right now with some of this stuff. And, like, I feel like a downer. I feel like a major downer, and I don't want to be one. So if you're really enjoying the shows right now and you think everything is great, I'm sorry. I don't mean to shit on stuff. And things are fine. They're just not anything better than fine, and I would like things to be better than fine, especially because you could see with, like, a few tweaks here and there how much better than fine almost everything could be, with the exception of the women's division, which is amazing.
Yeah, okay.
I went all over the place there.
No, so I think I'm going to run through a few things, right? So Paige comes back and has incredible momentum. And the momentum is in the numbers, right? So
right.
He goes and he puts up the top-selling shirt on Shop AEW that week, which actually got advertising for AEW, so that's a step up from last year. So, you know, they put him in Q7 of that Dynamite, and I'll mention why that in a minute, but, you know, and that does growth of 5% of viewership, 4% of demo, which was 10%, 11% above what that caller normally does across the last 90 days. And if you look at the ad break pattern of 2 ad breaks after 2 ad breaks, that would normally be -2, -3. So they were 7% up in both viewership and demo over what that would normally do. They then put him on a Collision. They don't put him at the start. He's buried in Q7 and 8 against the main event of the WWE pay-per-view, and he puts up 25% growth in a demo, which, small numbers. It's 0.07 to 0.09, but that is the biggest growth quarter of the year in any show in a demo. It's the biggest growth quarter of the year, which is slightly insane. And then, live attendances, Calgary, they added 1,426 tickets in the last week. It all looks slightly less if you look at the WrestleTix numbers, because there was an additional 218 that were accounted for that were added back into the map. You had Chicago do 5,291, up from 5,096 in the last visit, with huge walk-up sales. And I wasn't going to include that number, but enough people have messaged me and said, I went because I it was a wild card that I can't not mention it. And then Memphis in a few days went just under 500, took them to 2,497, so 20% of the venue from Wednesday to Saturday. The last time there, they said they did 3,100, but I was contacted by somebody who went to the last show, went to this one, and said, there probably wasn't that much different, but that was before things like WrestleTix existed back in January of 2020. So he could not have done any more, and that's before you get to that promo. That promo he cut, which didn't end up in full-on TV, which wouldn't happen to other people, let's put it that way, and that shows you the position that they put himself in. He cuts that promo. I was on a train back from London, actually, and I was like fucking rabid. I was like, oh my god,
it was crazy. Everybody was talking about it.
It was like, it was viral. Huge. It's like, how can you cut the legs from this guy? And I knew they were going to, but it was like, how can you cut the legs from it? And it forced a conversation. How serious that conversation was. I've had a few people that have told me. I had one I asked, and they were like, but don't get your hopes up. And I was like, okay, fair enough. But you still do, because you still think. And the funny thing is, like, I've listened to a lot of people talk about this since. I listened to James and Rich on One Nation Radio. I listened to Joe Lanza, Rich Creation, Voices of Wrestling. I've listened to Dave, Brian, Wade, Tom Martin, whoever. I've listened to as many people as I can to kind of get as many of the kind of opposite viewpoints. And what I don't think they get, other than maybe Brian Alvarez, who actually does get it, is why this made people upset. And not in the way of, I really want to see that match, so when they come back to it, I'm going to be really excited about it. That's not the same level of disappointment. This isn't Naito in Wrestle Kingdom 12. It's not. No. This is much more akin. And I've made the Daniel Bryan comparison from 2015 a number of times now, but I did it for a reason, and it's because it is actually perfect, because what you did, right, is they fucked the timing up on this. So this is self-inflicted. Yes. This isn't people getting ahead of themselves. This isn't anything else. This is self-inflicted from varying degrees of things that have happened over the last few years that have kind of culminated in this moment, and that's why people got upset. So you have now a situation where you have this story, this narrative, the one thing that people have been excited about in the men's division for this year predominantly, and we're saying that it's not worthy of the biggest stage at Wembley. This is what people say, it should be secondary. And it's the same thing with Paige. So there's this differentiation where there's a huge part of the audience that view him as a top guy. They view him as you hear all the time, main character of AEW. The ace. Okay, well, somebody want to tell the company that? No. There has been 2.5 years now since he lost the belt, or 2 years, 2 months, whatever you want to say it is, okay, where this guy has been underpromoted. In fact, they've allowed him to be buried in media constantly for 2 years now, without reply. And he's kept his mouth shut for their benefit. Not for his, definitely not for his, but for their benefit. And then on top of that, he has... this is a good one, right? So, off the top of your head, can you guess how many pay-per-view matches he's won in the last 2 years?
What is it, like 1, 2?
2. Yeah, 2. He has the worst pay-per-view record in the company during that period. He has the worst big match, matches that matter. I saw that phrase on the board this week, and it's a good one. Record in the company, and one of the worst overall records in the company. And he came out of that match with CM Punk, and then, he lost at Forbidden Door, and then he wrestled... Oh, guess how many matches he wrestled on Dynamite for the rest of that year? This is a good one.
Was it 1?
2.
None. 2.
2. Yeah, Roosh and Moxley, that's it. So, in terms of being promoted after losing the belt, it wasn't there. And, he doesn't main event pay-per-views. He's main evented one pay-per-view as member of the Elite versus BCC at Double or Nothing last year. Compared to like Moxley or Danielson. Let's have a look. So Moxley has main evented, I think, 5. I want to say 5. You write these lists and then you lose them, you see.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, the only difference is a fucking mouse click rather than...
I almost wish you had papers to shuffle.
I did last time, right?
Yeah.
So Moxley has main evented 5 pay-per-views in the last 2 years, MJF 5, Bryan Danielson 4, even Okada, 2, Darby Allin 3. So he doesn't main event pay-per-views, and he doesn't win. He doesn't wrestle enough. He's not promoted in the way that other people are. And he's still not considered, on this return. He's not considered a main guy for promotion with some of their partners. I had a conversation with someone about this week. He's not considered a main priority right now for that sort of thing. This is a differentiator, is that people see him as a top guy. They want him to get that push the similar way to Max does. They want him to be protected in the same way that Max is. And he's not. And he doesn't get those spots. And there's a frustration with that that's not born out of, I want to see this thing in narrative. It's, I want to see this guy in this spot because I enjoy these stories and I think he's, he should be in this spot. He deserves it in that aspect. And it's really hard to argue with when you look at the numbers that he produces and then you look at what they do with him and you just saying it doesn't match up. And they go, yeah, but he gets these great stories. And it's like, he overperforms with these stories, right? So Swerve Strickland was not supposed to become a world title feud.
No.
Okay. The John Moxley thing was just supposed to be a quick defense, under the breadth of, you watch the great promo he did, was literally like to build up John Moxley and MJF the same way that Chris Jericho was used to build up John Moxley for losing to CM Punk. It's the same thing. So he's a guy that's being fed to people, whereas I think there's a huge part of the audience that's sick of seeing him get fed to people. For all the things about Danielson loses, it's like he loses more than Danielson. And now he actually, it's quite funny that he has the losing record to Danielson now. So he's the guy putting people over, and he's actually the guy selling his losses, which no one else pretty much does in the company, it feels like, at the moment. So there's this thing where, same thing with Daniel Bryan, right? We like this guy. We think he should be a top guy. We don't agree with the way you're booking him and presenting him. And if anybody wants to tell me that he's been presented as a top guy in the last 2 years and can present that evidence, please come to me, right? Because I tell you, a lot of people, they don't believe that either. So it's that's part of it. It's a huge part of it. And then he comes back with all that momentum, and you can kind of give that audience that perfect scenario, just like you did in 2015 when Bryan came back from injury, and they looked at it and they said, we want this guy in the main event. Because being in the main event of a stadium show is a status thing. This is the whole thing. You had the same thing with CM Punk. It's like, well, he's, he can be a big star, but he's not one of the guys. He's not in the main event of WrestleMania. He walked out over that. So there is this thing of wanting them to be recognised and kind of viewed in that way. And that was always going to play with it. And when he came back in with all that momentum and you had this story that people were really invested in, and then you kind of build it so much that what you ended up doing was not making a choice, but you actually ended up making a swerve. You gave people an expectation that this story that we are invested in is going to be on the biggest stage that we have. It's going to culminate there. It's going to be, this huge moment that's going to kind of highlight two talents going forward, not looking backwards and playing on, other people's stories and nostalgias or creating moments, quote unquote. And then you swerve people. So you created it yourself. You didn't have to bring him back and make the wild card. You didn't have to bring him back as this new heel character and then take his momentum away in a week. And having continued to lose, which is all he's done. You look at Drew McIntyre and CM Punk, it's like Drew McIntyre wins something and then he gets knocked back. And yes, it's probably been too much with the amount of times he's been, quote unquote, screwed by CM Punk. But that's the way of kind of keeping somebody ticking over. And the problem is that you have a direct comparison because you can compare the way he was brought back to the way Max was brought back. Max who comes back, protected TV slots, open shows, commercial breaks, you know, they're not doing that much difference number-wise in terms of some of the audience that they bring in or different kind of parts or anything like that. But it's a huge difference in the way that they're kind of presented. Max is not going to lose to Wembley Stadium. And then when he does lose, you know, that character is embedded and it means something for the guy to beat him, and that should elevate them, which will be Will Ospreay. I don't know why there's kind of this belief that match is going to be anything else other than Will Ospreay and JF, by the way. That's kind of weird.
I do want to underline something that you just said, because I really think it's important. Like, that, for people being like, oh no, that was the Danielson thing, that may be the story that they thought they were telling, but it is not the story they were telling us on screen.
No.
The number of people who assured me, multiple locations, I was told over and over and over again, I said, Danielson's winning this. Hangman is not winning this. No, that's not the story they're telling. Look at the story they're telling on screen. Sarah, they're telling the story on screen. It's going to be Hangman versus Swerve at Wembley. That is the match. That has to, I've told this over and over and over again. Yeah. Right? I still have people who are like, well, there'll be something that'll happen in Blood and Guts and Hangman will be added to the match at Wembley. Like, people do not want to believe, and I think this ties back somewhat to, like, a lot of fans do not want to think negatively of Tony Khan, right?
Yeah.
They either in the way he books or the way he evaluates talent, they don't want to think negatively of him. There's always an excuse. You see a lot. He gets a lot of benefit of the doubt, right? And I think one of the problems with that is that, you know, people cannot envision that he looks at Hangman and thinks, well, this is not my guy, right? Which I think at this point it's clear he doesn't, because if he did, Hangman would be treated very differently. You know, like you just laid out all the stuff. And this is not to say, like, you know, we sound like dramatic turtles. Like, this is not to say that Hangman is not, you know, an upper mid-card guy. Like, we get it. Like, he's not, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, but that didn't mean anything when it was Danielson when he was in WWE, when people were upset there. It didn't mean anything with Punk. Punk was promoted 10 times better in that year before WrestleMania in 29 in New York, where he didn't get a main event. He was still, you know, tons more promoted, more pages. It's that difference between, we're not saying this guy is nobody, we're saying that people want him to be a main guy, a top guy, something the show's built around. And as much as you keep telling yourself that he's the main character, it's not reality. It's not how they present it. They would not bring John Moxley back in quarter 7 with 2 ad breaks and trying to minimise his impact so people weren't pulling for him to win when they knew they were going to do that result. They wouldn't put him in the dead-end spot in Collision. They wouldn't beat a new character after a week. They just wouldn't do it.
No.
They wouldn't do it. No. And they definitely wouldn't have a promo that was like, that may be potentially important to somebody's career, and then not even fucking put it on television. It's absolute bollocks for people to say. And, you know, I see all these things and I see like, oh, you know, he'd be better off not being in the main event at Wembley. Like, who the fuck has ever argued that one before? I'm sorry, you'll be better off not being in the main event at Wembley Stadium in the biggest show of the year. Fuck, if he gets beat, well, we'll probably get beat at Wembley anyway, and his heel character's dead regardless. So it's like, will you do that in the main event, or are you going to do that 6-down card? And it's like, oh, but he'll be in with a Carter, and it's like, he's there to get a Carter over to be a draw with this audience, not the other way around. Right. Don't mix it up, you know. And it's, you know, our friend Aaron always, I think he tries to bait me into trying to tell some, you know, kind of reality of what people say about, you know, the relationship in the last few years between, you know, Tony and Hangman. But it's a case of nothing they've done in the recent weeks suggests he's a priority. And nothing they're telling other people suggests he's a priority. This has a big story. You know, you can talk about Cody Rhodes and, you know, The Rock and how that's being built for another year. Well, where's that going to culminate? That's going to be at WrestleMania. We talk about Naito and Okada. Where did that culminate? It culminated in the Dome for the world title. You know, now we're doing this thing of, it doesn't need to be the world title, even though it's been about the world title since this thing started. Since that first promo that Swerve cut, since the promo at WrestleDream after WrestleDream, and then they tried to downcard them to, you know, only being worth a TNT title shot, which is something they do quite a lot. You know, they've done it with, they did it with Will Ospreay once he beat Bryan Danielson. He couldn't even have an IC title shot. They would have gauntlet. So it's a common thing. But this is this thing. So you are telling people that this story is secondary. You are telling people once again that this guy is secondary, that they're invested in, which was the same problem with Daniel Bryan and the same problem with CM Punk. And then the guy loses all the time. So what's the reason to get behind him, which was the Dean Ambrose problem. And we don't even need to compare it to WWE, because the biggest problem that AEW has, and I think the biggest problem we're identifying when we look at Blood and Guts, we're looking at all these other builds, is that their narrative and what they deliver with their narrative is not as strong as it was in the past. They are competing against themselves. It's not against, you know, WWE in that aspect. And maybe it is in terms of, You know, WWE fans are finding more in the way they're telling their stories at the moment than AEW is, and they all have issues. You know, you look at the Will Ospreay thing with the Tiger Driver, and you know Danielson never selling that, and then he did it in the match. He tried to do it in a match with Swerve Strickland, and now he's like, oh, I can't do it against the heel. You know, that's no different from having like Seth Rollins saying, I'm never going to challenge for this title again while you're champion, and then 2 days later it's like, oh, it's gone. So that happens in everywhere. But there was a standard set that is now kind of, and you won't notice it until it's at the very, very top, and that's where this is. But the thing that I haven't heard talked about is I've heard lots of things like, Danielson deserves it, give him his moment, it's the last chance that you've got. And there's a few things on this, okay?
He's not fucking going anywhere.
Well,
like,
yeah.
If he's gonna fucking keep on wrestling. This is the thing that makes me crazy, right? Like, it's not his last fucking match. The guy's got, like, that's the part that makes me absolutely fucking insane, right?
Yeah.
And then listen, and you go on to your other thing, because I know where you're going with this, and you're dead right on it, too, so.
Okay, so they've had this Danielson thing planned for months, right? March, at least. And so you brought back Paige, you knuckle his kind of character and his momentum, and we'll see how much momentum that drops, you know, we'll see this week, you know. Last week did 71,000 and female 34, well, this week, I don't know. You know, you're not even selling the match on their interaction because you can't build to that match immediately. However, right, Bryan Danielson, so you've had all this time, and what have you done with him in the last year? Okay, so he won a string of matches. He actually won 5 pay-per-view matches in a row. Okay? And then he loses to Eddie Kingston. And then Danielson doesn't really care. He just goes into, I'm going to be the best wrestler in the world thing with Will Ospreay. Based on in-ring, which made no sense, like, psychologically, whatever. And then he loses that one, and then he just doesn't sell the Tiger Driver thing. Because a lot of the decisions we talked about back in April, you remember we were all like raising flags and they're like, why are you so mad? And like, because a lot of the stuff then is what's fucked up everything now. And it's like, the same with the Elite stuff as well. And it's like, okay, so he doesn't sell that. He comes back, he then rolls upwards again into the main event for Double or Nothing, where they scramble to try and find a team AEW. And then all of a sudden it's like, I've lost a few matches. You know, my body's like, oh, I think I'll go and win the world title now. And it's like, you've had 3 years to do this. You've had a year and probably to plan this. It's, you know, you wanted the Sting thing. You know, he's not retiring, so you're not getting the benefit of the retirement angle. You know, you're not getting the 5,000 tickets the next day of a match announcement that Muto got with the Naito thing, or you're not getting the Sting kind of thing into it. So you need to tell a stronger story. So what they've actually managed to do by fucking this timing up so badly, because they should just never have brought Paige back. You know, if you bring Paige back and you bring him in for blood and guts and you tell a different story, you don't get half of this shit. Right. And maybe if you build him up with Vignettes in a few weeks, or you drag that out, you'll get more momentum out of him rather than cut him off at the fucking knees. But that's just standard. But it's like, so now we have this situation where Bryan Danielson, you know, who a lot of people think is the greatest wrestler of all time, is going for the world title in AEW, and for a mixture of him doing numerous interviews, not just for last month. This whole it was a swerve thing is complete bollocks. He's been doing those interviews for 3 years, 4 years, saying, you know, I don't want the world title. He was saying at Wrestle Dream last year, I don't want the fucking main event. You know, after he had the cold main event with, well, not cold, but it was lukewarm with Okada compared to Will and Kenny.
Yeah,
you know?
Forbidden Door.
Yeah, which we were at, so we know what that was like. But it's like, he does all these things, and then this thing you present on screen is so weak. You know, I was thinking, right, they'll run the Hangman promo, then they'll run some big Danielson promo and kind of, you know, on that night, and then they just didn't. So they put no effort into that match. And then what you've left people with is people wanting to see another match on top of this, which is insane. And then you've left people like not giving a fuck about him going for the title or even resenting it. Like, how can you fuck that up so badly? You have something that is ready made that, yeah, we talked about before, it's an easy thing to feed to the media, and you manage to fuck it up so bad that people want something else. Like, and you know, there's the thing of I like the kind of foray that people are angry that someone says, oh, you know, it compares to like Punk taking the title off Paige in 2022, and it's like, no, Danielson's not CM Punk. He's not whispering in Tony's ear about the state of Paige's title reign or whatever. The key thing about that is we've got a babyface looking like a procession where everyone's like, oh, just give him his moment, without any care for the fact that you've got a homemade babyface world champion. We've not even set this up so like Danielson's facing any real animosity or he's chasing a heel. You've not made people want it. You've done this match where you think is going to be the last big match of Bryan Danielson's career, and there's another thing on that in a minute. And you made it so it's had no plausible, visual impact on any metric whatsoever, including ticket sales, because it's doing a lot less than it's basically just doing exactly what it was doing compared to the difference when you had a hot storyline going in there last year with Max and Cole. You've made this thing like a non-metric mover and something people aren't massively excited about, and they just say, oh, just give him flowers, he just deserves it. You should be fucking raving for this. You should be, God, I need to see this. And instead, you've got that feeling of, well, I don't want to see Swerve lose after 4 months. I don't want to see that. I want to see him, I don't want to see a crowd kind of booing him or kind of cheering the other guy. I don't care about this great moment. You've created that. You've created that because you fucked up your timing and you fucked up your story. And actually, if you're a fan of Bryan Danielson, you should feel let down by that as well.
Yeah.
They had this key moment, they could do the Sting thing. Yeah, so let's turn Swerve Strickland heel for this program, even though he's in a program where he's where people want to cheer him like we saw at Forbidden Door, to do this. Like, that's exactly what the mistake was in 2022. It's not about him being CM Punk, and it's not about him not deserving anything. It's that you've managed to fuck this up so badly that people don't want to see something that they should be desperate to see. How the fuck do you do that? Like, how have you managed to make this a thing? No matter the fact that you've inadvertently kind of buried Paige with the comments by saying, I don't really care, and everyone's like, well, this guy doesn't even care, but he's still in that spot. And it's like, oh, he's an ex-WWE guy. Like, how the fuck has that ever mattered in this? Like, have we seen any differentiation? No. So you're working on the basis that this narrative have to be stronger, and you've not delivered on that. You've not delivered a stronger narrative. You've made him seem like he doesn't fucking care, and maybe he doesn't, maybe he does, I don't know. But that's the story you've told people. You've told people these stories. This is the thing with the Okada thing. It's like, oh, Paige could replace Kenny Omega. You've also told that story on screen. So we keep telling him he's secondary, and we keep saying that Danielson doesn't give him a fuck. And we're putting these stories on screen.
And you wonder why your world title's devalued.
It's not about, like, the other things you see on side. What they are putting on screen has been detrimental to all these people. It's detrimental to Strickland, because no one's fucking talking about Strickland in this. It's all about, oh, give Bryan his moment. This is, someone's first stadium main event. It's the first, black world champion in AEW stadium main event. Nobody gives a fuck about him. They're treating him like he's Sonata. That's the way they're talking about it right now. He's struggling to find heat in it. They are behind 3 other programs now, and a 4th one that doesn't even fucking exist on a card. In terms of excitement for this pay-per-view. You announced Bryan Danielson in a last match and it didn't move fuck all. That means you fucked up. It means you fucked up. I'm sorry, it means you fucked up. And yes, you know what? WWE ran Leave a Loose SmackDown versus World title and it didn't do great either. So there's a precedent for that. You do not have the advantage of this being his last match. Nope. And, you also have to take into, he's not retiring. So is it worth doing this? And then in 6 months he walks out of WrestleMania for a match. How much fucking worth is it then? Are you making the right decision for your future, or are you doing it for your kind of personal want? And I think there is an element to that. I think Tony wants to give him that moment, and, fair enough. But then don't fucking wave something else in front of people's faces that they end up wanting more. And that's exactly what they've done. And I don't have any sympathy for it. And I don't, I hate this thing of people can't be disappointed, I can't be angry about it, because that's the narrative story that they told. That is the story that they told. We didn't tell them for them. We weren't making it up as we go along. We weren't going, you know what, I really like to see this. No, you brought him back and you put him in that position. You advertised it. You pushed it. And then you got cold feet, because you showed that you got cold feet, because you tried to downplay everything about that return that you could possibly do. And that's it for me. I'm going in a rant, but it's...
No, it's just so defeating. Like I said, it's not like this is bad, laughably bad. Like, the pieces aren't there, right?
Yeah.
It's not like these are shitty wrestlers and there's no history and there's no nothing and whatever. Like you said, you could even pull off this Danielson match with some work and some tweaks and some build to it. And instead
they've had all that time, and this is what they chose to do.
And this is what you do. You've allowed Danielson to go out there and talk about how he doesn't want to be world champion. You've created, you've taken the match with the Heat, and now you have to, like you said, you have to downplay it because the Heat can't be between Swerve and Hangman because it has to be between Swerve and Danielson, right? And, you know, we haven't seen Danielson since last week, except
That's
in
a
a
huge
promo
mistake.
where he cried, right? Like, he's sad and all this other shit. Like, fine, right? And again, there's nothing else behind it.
No,
There's
no momentum.
nothing else behind it. There's no other programs with any other fucking Heat. And whether that's because of shit that they've done personally or because of the injuries, we get it. Like, I don't want to downplay that. At the same time, it's just frustrating over and over again to watch this because they continually freaking shoot themselves in the foot. And we're in a situation where, again, you have injuries, you have stuff to older established stars. Well, guess what? You don't have the younger stars in place to put them in position because you haven't focused the time and attention on them. Because every fucking time we have a pay-per-view, we go back to Danielson, we go back to the same people over and over and over again. Right? And it's like, you are, again, afraid of your own history. You're afraid of the people you've made in your corporate company, with the exception of MJF. It's like, that's it. And it's just cold. It's dream matches and it's cold and it sucks. It sucks.
It plays into all those criticisms they've always had.
Right.
Well, now they are looking for moments. They aren't telling stories.
Right.
And there's this thing of, you should trust it and we should see where it goes and with this page story and, but it's kind of, do we trust him? Yeah, I trust what he would do. I trust what Swerve would do. Do I trust what they will do? No. Because here's the thing, it's like, how many of the big recent stories have they missed their timing on? Numerous,
All of them.
Yeah, they missed it, MJF Cole completely missed the timing, probably twice over, they should have done the change of FTR for the tag titles, didn't do that, and then they missed that one. And then Undisputed Kingdom is a complete and utter fucking failure. They missed the timing inadvertently, whatever, in MJF and Punk. And, they missed the timing with Swerve winning the world title. And it felt lesser. There's been numerous stories. This elite stuff is a complete fucking mess, and it has been since Darby Allin was driven to the arena by Tony Khan, who just couldn't stay away. So it's like you have so many things that pick up momentum and then have unfulfilling endings, and that didn't used to be the case, and that's the difference. And the more that builds up, and the more you kind of feel that's where you get this kind of crescendo moment, which is what we had. And if everyone goes, the match will be great. For a lot of us, we don't fucking care. And it's like, oh, but Danielson's the greatest of all time. Well, present him that fucking way. Present him that way, because this is not what you're telling people. It's not what you're telling people on screen. I got a question, actually. It's just in numbers, because everyone's just like, oh, you're just dead emotional and whatever. No. If I want to be dead emotional, I would get myself in real trouble, but hey. I got a question from Daniel on the Discord, who said, what's the business case for Hangman versus Swerve at Wembley instead of Danielson versus Swerve? I would love you to go over the facts in the pod. And so what I thought I'd do is just kind of go through some different things. So in terms of ticket sales, I thought it was kind of interesting that Dave Meltzer said that it wouldn't be any different if Bryan was in there to Hangman, because I didn't see that coming. I didn't see him saying it. But yeah, so in terms of ticket sales, this has had no effect on ticket sales whatsoever. We spoke about it a few weeks ago, that they will put Danielson out in the local media, in the national media, and maybe that will move something. But the nostalgia, kind of the push of this is the first one that would generate kind of a lot more local sales, is just not there. This year it will be much, much more difficult. So, and then last year they ran a hot match, and that had huge sales as soon as it was announced. It's doubling, sometimes tripling, sometimes 5 times what this is doing day by day on the same kind of days after the announcement. So the benefit of a hot match outweighs a name in that aspect. So I look at that and I think this year needs to be more generated by matches, because you don't have that kind of first thing, and that would be one thing that I would look at. The other thing that you would look at is that if you want to look at all the different factors, pages, quarter hours, episodes, etc., have had a much greater hit rate, much greater impact. He came back with huge momentum, and they need to convert him into a TV guy. You know, he is, you know, you take, you know, Danielson's out, okay. Then you've got Moxley, and you've got Max, and then Jericho, and then he's the next guy behind. You can argue maybe ahead of that, but that's who they've got, right? So you need that guy going forward. And even when you sign this deal, you still have to perform. You know, if you don't perform, then you will still have issues. So you still have to perform. So why wouldn't you want to convert that? And also that's going to carry you much greater through this next period, whereas we've not seen great numbers for any of the face versus face stuff that Danielson's done or a lot of the build of the programs. So in terms of TV ratings, in terms of quarter hours, wherever you want to look at it, you know, he is at a higher point. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what it is. That is the numbers as they are this year. And the other part of that is, you know, he has the base in women. And women is holding up a lot of these numbers. The last 2 weeks, women have held up the numbers. So, and that will be the part that gets hit most in the next 3 weeks, because this is where I thought Danielson not being on TV was absolutely fucking insane last week, is you have 2 weeks with lesser competition. We've spoken about these 2 weeks for months. You know, we identified them when I talked about the Copper and the Euros and everything else. Okay, the RNC did nothing. It's kind of funny that that did nothing to any wrestling show, actually, this week. But that's not going to happen with the Dems now because of the Joe Biden news. So you have this past week with the only sports competition being the Fever. You did have to start Big Brother, which was actually massively down on like for like against last year. This week you have Mets Yankees Subway Series, which did hurt them last year, but we'll see how that goes. And then you have same Big Brother and that sort of thing. So these are the 2 lesser competition weeks. These are your 2 impact weeks before we get to the pay-per-view. The 3 weeks after, you've got the Olympics for 2 weeks. And then the week after, you've now got the Dems National Convention, which is going to be huge now, because it's going to decide, you know, the Democratic candidate from scratch. So you need to have him on. He needs to be on this week. And the fact that you're doing, you know, here's what you could have won is not fucking helping you when you're not even showing what you have won. Okay? So that just seems like an insane decision for me. But when we get to the Olympics and we get to that, you know, the female viewership is the bit that's going to hurt the most. And that's the bit that's holding up these numbers. And you'd have a much better chance with Paige than you would with Danielson in that aspect. And having the heel face thing and the kind of inbuilt story is always going to deliver you better numbers than working from scratch. That's just how it is. Oh, this is a funny one.
But have you considered that Bryan Danielson was in Ring of Honor and deserves to have a fun? Like this is the part with Toni.
I don't fucking want to hear about deserves.
I'm so fucking over it.
I want to hear about somebody earning it. Yeah, and he has great matches in that, but I want the narrative to earn it. I want the story to earn it, and the story fucking doesn't right now.
No, it doesn't.
And the story that does is the one that's been put to the side. But my favourite, so some of my favourite ones as well. So there's the thing that it isn't the right kind of match, being a grudge match for All In, and I can kind of see it in a way. But here's the kind of counter argument on that. So WrestleMania 32, yeah, we did a load of work on that. Do you know what match moved the most tickets for WrestleMania 32 on announcement? And a guess. You'll never get this one. It wasn't Roman Reigns and Triple H. It was The Undertaker and Shane McMahon and Hell in a Cell. Yeah. So the big plunder blood match was the thing that moved the most tickets in, you know, for Hell in a Cell for WrestleMania like that. And some of the other points is that, you know, there's a short-sightedness. So you do this Daniel Bryan thing, you get that kind of, you know, because it is like the Daniel Bryan 2013 thing. That's what you're looking for, right? You're trying to replicate that image and do this sort of thing. But what is your long-term impact? So the long-term impact would be greater for having Paige in that main event, for having him and Swerve, you know, so it's a story about both of them, not just about Bryan Danielson. For having him on that media cycle, for actually getting behind him and showing your audience that you're behind him, because there's a huge part of the audience that are invested in him and don't trust you with their booking. And being in that thing would be like a show of faith, and that would help their faith. And their faith that you will book the biggest things to culminate at the biggest events, and that you will push forward in the way they used to see. Because you look at like Double or Nothing 2021, you know, you had the Battle Royal with Christian and Jungle Boy.
Yep.
And everyone thought Christian would win because, you know, 100%. That's what everyone else would do. That's what everybody else would do. And you know what? They did the opposite. They pushed their people ahead of looking backwards. And that's something that people came up with an expectation of AEW, and they haven't done that here. They
haven't done that in a while.
No, they haven't. Not probably since 2022. Since that influx of...
Max being the exception.
Yeah, but Max was always cited for it, wasn't he?
I agree, but I do want to be as fair as possible.
But it's, so there's that thing of, you push forward for the future. And also, there's no talent that could benefit more from having that kind of media run than Adam Page. You've cut him off legitimately from the last couple of years, and you tell that story, and it's the story of we are an alternative. This is what we present. These are our people, not here's the guy that you saw at WrestleMania 10 years ago doing a yes chant who does the same amount of Google Trends as Page to start with, So it's kind of a funny one. But my main things in terms of business is, do I think that Danielson will sell more tickets? No, because I don't think there's been that record in AEW. Page's late ticket sales records is pretty good. A hot match is doing more last year than this one is doing currently. It moved business. It didn't matter that Max wasn't a household name or Adam Cole wasn't a household name. It mattered that the thing was hot. And that didn't just drive tickets, it drove pay-per-view buys because it got to 205,000. You've got to compensate with that. Pay-per-view record. Page's pay-per-view record is stronger. Page's merchandise record is stronger, which is hilarious because he's had one shirt last year, I think 3 the year before, and never in venues for, I can count on one hand actually, in venues since he won the belt. So in terms of the metrics, is there enough differentiation to say that you should put Bryan over in this situation and not think of your future? And I don't think there is. This isn't, the funniest thing is the people arguing against it are the same people that were so annoyed when Punk wasn't the main event and The Rock was, and there was so much more monetary reasons behind it.
Well, I think you could argue that there could be monetary reasons, but they've shown so far they're not willing to capitalize on them. They haven't built a story, we talked about, they haven't built a story for it. They're not, they'll do a couple of, I guarantee you there'll be at least one interview where Danielson talks about how he doesn't want to win, or he's less interested in the belt, and then he will go ahead and win it.
The point is never to try and pick between them. I didn't really want to answer that one, but we'll do it and just say, look, if you look at the metrics, there's nothing really other than you look at social media following, and they will see that as an important thing, but there's nothing really that determines that you should make this choice as a choice, and that's how they presented it as. They didn't need to do that, but that's what I come back to, is there are so many things in this that you didn't need to do that they self-inflicted on themselves.
Agreed.
That's the issue here. The issue is the timing. With WWE, when they did theirs and they thought, oh, fuck it, we don't care, they killed Roman Reigns for 6 years. He was the draw that they thought he was. People didn't hate Roman Reigns before the Daniel Bryan thing. The Shield wasn't one of the most popular things in the company. But because of the timing and the way they fucked it, that's what happened, and that's what this is. So this isn't about a choice between the two men, although, there is always that element because it's about having a spot on a stadium show on the biggest show of the year, and what that shows, that's not changed. There is nobody that says they're better off not being in the main event of a fucking stadium show than there are. But it's about how they presented it and what they did with it, and no one having the trust because of that in what they're going to do going forward. I think that's what it is. So it's I got a message. I want to read you this actually. I want to see your thoughts, right? And I asked. They don't want a name, so it's just a statement. But this is a sentiment that you're probably not hearing from elsewhere because I don't think people want to talk about it, or they want to talk about it publicly. I've got quite a few messages this week, and it's like, I get it, because AEW is so much under the cosh sort of thing in terms of, WWE stuff, fan base, to worry about the TV deal, the attendances, all the things that we talk about. And maybe we've gone very harsh on them, but we're doing this because you have to see why people are upset rather than just fucking kind of dismissing them. But it's leaving people kind of feeling demoralised and not going, oh, I really want to see him come back for this, but just going, you know what, I'm just going to take a break, I'm just going to watch it. Or there's a lot of people we know that are very much disinterested or just want to watch the G1, and I'm probably no group. But it's, this is okay. It says, Tony has learned absolutely nothing from what happened in 2021, 2022. Rather than seeing through the wrestlers the audience have got invested in, he's promoting another era of high-profile signings and his chosen few. everyone who you cared about before is now either condemned to put them over or has disappeared with no explanation. To top it off, we now have a nostalgia run for a guy who is constantly at the front anyway, that is being shoehorned in ahead of the only story anyone has really cared about in the last 12 months. Saying anything gets you condemned by the AEW faithful, and it's completely demoralising. And, I asked for some names. I thought, okay, so what names would you say have kind of been pushed to the forefront that people may have been invested in? And, they gave me a list. So it's like Darby Allin. Okay, so, yeah, that's an easy one. They win the main event at Revolution. Goes nowhere. He goes nowhere. He's now playing around with the TNT title again. Fine, okay. Yep. Takeshita, he's in the G1.
Yeah, he's doing great in the G1.
He is.
Looks
he's
fantastic
great.
in the G1. To the point where people are like, he should go to New Japan. Like,
yeah.
They treat him better there.
Yeah, what's his upside now? You're looking and you're thinking, okay, so people got invested in him. He beat Kenny Omega. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And now he's in the G1 because they don't have anything. Okay, Jay White. So Jay White, who beat Darby Allin, so takes that heat from the Sting thing, and then they did nothing with it. Okay, fair. Hobbs. He's injured now, but previous to then, nothing moved. Undisputed Kingdom. That was just a disaster. Complete disaster. Eddie Kingston. So Eddie beat Bryan Danielson to then be fed to Okada. Okay, fair.
He beat John Moxley and Bryan Danielson
to
get fed to
Okada. To fed to Okada. Yeah, and Takeshi's the same thing, right? You beat Jericho, you beat Omega to be fed to Will Ospreay. Right. So that's fair. Orange Cassidy, we talked about that one. Adam Page, I'm sure that'll be his next step. That's what he does. John Moxley. We need the Brian Alvarez thing with where the fuck is Hangman? We may need a where the fuck is Moxley. Yeah. And this is the thing. So when you say that Page couldn't be brought back any later, because they brought him back the first day of the pay-per-view and they need him because they've been this TV deal. Well, the biggest TV mover in the last 5 years, or the greatest draw in their history, quote unquote, isn't on TV. So don't give me that one. But yeah, so I can kind of see the point that if you've invested in these people and then they've been moved to one side, then you're going to feel kind of demoralised with this because it's harder to invest again in new people. What's the point? And you may think, what's the point? Because what happens when the next group come in? We're going to do the same thing over and over and over again.
Well, I think this comes back to my point about, like, you talked about Takeshita, who I think was maybe more ready than some of the people that I'm going to mention now. But, like, you're in a situation now where, you are missing some people and you did have injuries that derailed some stuff, right?
Yes.
And, where are the younger stars that you might have been able to have positioned to be in a place where they could have taken over, right? People were super invested in Daniel Garcia. I'm really confident when he comes back, he's going to get a giant pop. But he essentially got used as a chess piece to facilitate MJF's heel turn, right? Unnecessary, Look at Top Flight. Tremendously talented, definitely need some. I'm not saying they're completely ready and all that other stuff, but they're just basically doing trios and tag matches. And I know there's been injuries there, etc. And the same with Private Party, too. But, what are the Lucha Brothers doing? What is Pac doing? There's so many people that, because he should be added to that list of AEW people that, folks are invested in. He came back, that match with Okada, people were going fucking nuts for it. What has he done since then? And I think that's where it's we're just stuck in these sort of endless, the conglomeration is great. They're super funny, but it's gone from something that seemed like it was a holding pattern to something that's just an endless mid-card feud. This feels like Best Friends versus the Hardy Family Office times Redux. Remember how long that went on?
Forever.
9 months?
Forever.
9 months? Yeah. Just endless configurations of the same multi-man matches. And Roderick Strong's great, don't get me wrong, but nobody's doing anything. Let me rephrase that. None of the men are doing anything. Everyone is stuck in a holding pattern. We're having retreads of the same feuds. Anytime anything gets some heat, it gets immediately neutered for whatever reason. I think the Young Bucks are a perfect fucking example of that, right? That angle is dead. That gimmick is
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah,
Like,
completely.
what a great gimmick that was fucking really doing something, and he got cold feet or whatever the fuck happened, and it's dead. You know, no need for that. Like, it's just so stupid. We're gonna have another fight, and like, don't even get me started on this. You had a go home promo for Blood and Guts, where the basis for the feud is that the Young Bucks won't come to work on Saturday. Are you kidding me with this bullshit?
Which I really wouldn't highlight the Saturday thing or the press thing, because when you look into the reasons, it's not exactly going to make you go Team AEW.
Like, that's the part where I'm just like, dudes, like, and I get maybe it's a meme or maybe it's like a fucking joke backstage or who the fuck knows, but like, at this point, like, I need somebody, like, part of me feels like there's no bad cop to sit some of these guys down and say, this is a shit promo. You have to do a better job. Darby, you are a great wrestler. Everybody fucking loves you. That was a shit promo. You have to do a better job. We have to come up with a better reason as to why you want to be in Blood and Guts. Cash Wheeler, thank you so much for coming to work. You do not need to be litigating your fucking criminal case on fucking television during your promo. That should be fucking unacceptable. Like, are you kidding me with this bullshit? Like, and we're gonna have another fight. Like, I just can't. Could FTR, for the love of God, do something different?
No.
Could House of Black, for the love of God, do something different? Do you know what I would kill for, Trish? And I told you this already. You know, would I die for just RJ City being put in charge of FTR's creative and FTR have to fucking do what he says? Like, could you imagine? Like, think about the naked desperation that seeps through every tweet that Dax Harwood makes, right? The imposter syndrome, the terror that he's not good enough. Could you imagine what he could do if he could, like, maybe put that into his fucking character, right? Like, think about how great that would be. And instead it's like, oh, we've got to be the best in the world, so we're going to fight the Young Bucks fucking again. And I'm sorry. And I know that there are people who are like, they're the greatest tag teams ever. They should fight each other. You've got to be fucking shitting me at this point. Like, you've got to be shitting me at this point. It's just tired. And I feel like that's the part where, like, and I don't mean to be so down, and I feel like such a bummer, but, like, somebody needs to take some of these guys aside and tell them that their ideas suck. And if I hear another fucking complaint about, like, something that went on backstage as the basis for a fucking feud, like, I'm sorry. And, like, I appreciate that Will Ospreay is trying his little heart out, but, like, I came in here to rescue AEW from you, MJF. Well, yeah, we know. But MJF is still on fucking TV, and his shitty ideas are still on fucking TV, so I'm not confident how much rescuing has actually been done.
He's gonna run around with his little American belt.
He's gonna be the fucking most racist, horrible. Like, you can see it coming already. Like, you know exactly what's gonna happen. Like, I mean, maybe in a miracle he'll go to fucking Arena Mexico and try, right? It won't be as embarrassing as it was against Hechicero, but, like, come on, dude. Like, can we do something? Could someone have a little bit of, like, you know what I mean? This is why people, again, it goes back to your argument about why fucking people were so depressed about Hangman. Someone came back and was doing something new and was trying something different and was coming up with something that had been done before, and balls chopped off because we don't want to make other people feel bad about themselves. Like, it's just shitty. I don't know. Like, I get that. Like, I get it.
They have so much, like, and people are like, oh, they'll tell this story and they'll get through it, and is that story going to end at the same point? Are we going to end on a big stage? Is it going to end with a world title? No. It's not. So, no. And it's like, oh, they have all the time in the world, and it's all these arguments were the same ones I heard the other way around in 2013-14, and it kills me laughing. Because it's like, these are the same things I heard. I didn't hear this about Naito and Omega because it was a straight choice between, two hot prospects, and yeah, there's a lot of people that still think Naito should have beat Okada, but they knew he'd get his moment. That's not the same thing here. They don't think Paige is going to get his moment. They don't. They don't have that faith, and that's what it's driven out in the last few years. Is it's driven out that faith, and every time you kind of get a little bit back in with that faith, and you think, okay, all right, okay, we can trust this, and they're going to move forward. And I think it's kind of ironic that there's so many descriptions that say, this is the reason why they're losing viewers, and it's all the Brashacho stuff, and it's all this, and it's all that. And the people that care about this stuff or are frustrated about this stuff, they'll still watch. Well, they're not still watching. They're watching the G1 with fucking us in our group chat this morning and haven't touched AEW in months. Like, this is not the reality. There are other reasons, and I think it's so driven by, certain demos kind of being in charge of the conversation that we kind of want to ignore some of the reasons. And we do want to ignore them because we want them to succeed. We want them to be successful. And we want to enjoy this product. And, there's this thing, you look back at 2020 and 2021 with nostalgia, and it's because we fucking enjoyed it more.
Because it was good. Because it was better.
Enjoyed it more.
Sucked. There was something else going on that was interesting. If it wasn't for the fucking women's division, I got to be honest with you, I'm going to turn the TV off and not turn it back on again.
Yeah.
Like, look at fucking Toni Storm. Like, I will say this, right? Mm-hmm. People shit all over this angle, and I get that it wasn't for everyone, but it fucking had stakes. It was an emotional component. Mm-hmm. There was a story we walked through, and there was a fucking moment on fucking 2 Wednesdays ago, right? Like, and that moment was fucking shocking. Even though we all should have seen it coming, because if you've seen the fucking movie, Mariah is the bad guy.
I have never seen the film.
Well, all right, it's good, but it's really dated.
Okay.
It's very dated. There's a lot of like monologues about how women are only fulfilled when they get married and have children. But it's and by Betty Davis of all people, which like I'm sorry,
Okay.
But it's a good fucking movie, and like that whole thing was like, again, this is part of the reason why it worked, because they gave it the time, they let it take its. It wasn't like, let's not sit here and be like, oh my God, Timeless Tony was spectacular from the jump. It wasn't. It took a while to figure itself out. Those early vignettes, some of that early stuff was not great. It got freaking its shit together. Mariah has done nothing but be fucking spectacular, and they can back it up in the ring, and it fucking is going to be that match is going to have so much fucking heat, right? That match is going to have so much fucking heat. It'll probably have more heat than any fucking other thing on that card.
It'll be split too, because, there's this thing that Mariah is from the UK, so they're all going to cheer for Mariah, but Toni Storm grew up in the UK. She came through in the UK. Sometimes I have to think back to, when she was a teenager wrestling on shows and kind of being sat around before shows with, like, the Lycos guys or whatever, and I'm like, geez, like, that's the same person.
I know.
Like, it's really, like, it's weird because she spent so much time just on the indies and stuff, and we just spent so much time kind of in the same rooms or whatever, but it's like, there was a connection there. So I don't think there's this huge thing that Mariah's going to get cheered by everybody. I don't think that's the case.
I don't think that's the case at all.
But, yeah, I think it'll have heat. Britt Baker and Mercedes will have heat. Britt will put her over, because that's that thing that plays in as well, that gets people frustrated around that original thing. But it's a good spot for Britt to come back into, and that's progressing along. But they have, I don't know if I think nothing has heat. I think that it's a case of there's nothing that has heat that's like something that people can really get their teeth into. So the Max Will thing, you can kind of see where that's going, and that's going to play on the nationalistic lines. You can see the stuff with Britt and Mercedes. You can see what they're doing with Toni and Mariah. But there's no overarching thing. That's the thing, isn't it? It's like that overarching thing that...
England versus the UK worked so well the last time they did it. Or England versus the US did so well. The last time AEW did that storyline, it was so successful. I'm not surprised they're running back to it.
It was so successful, Cody Rhodes went to another company.
It fucking ruined Cody Rhodes' character forever. Even though he solved racism, which we were super happy about.
And
that's
we
still
talked
not
about
his daughter
and his dog. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I love that sign. I always shove it in our group chat, don't I? There was a thing. It was back at when he beat Lance Archer at Double or Nothing 2020, and it's like everybody did a great job except Cody.
He's not bitter at all about the way things ended in AEW.
That was hilarious because it's like, I hate how I was portrayed in the book that I was the last one to sign, but I was the last one to sign. Like, oh, come on.
I was portrayed in this book accurately, but I shouldn't have been. Like, what the fuck, dude?
And he says, that thing where it's like, their fans drive people away from the product. No, the thing that's been people struggle with the product is getting invested in someone and being turned away, and the narratives not being a storylines. And I talked about the Wade Keller poll, and I think that's probably the most accurate thing. The storylines are not as strong. It's not just WWE are hot. They're number 2. It's hard. It's like, no, they're not giving people enough reason to invest on a regular basis. So they'll turn up and they'll watch the odd thing. And if you hype a match for 3 weeks like you have with this one, you're going to get that result. And maybe that's all you need. And there is a part of me that wonders, how much does it fucking matter anymore? Because they're going to get the TV deal. And once they do that, they should be in pretty safe waters. But there's the other part of me says, no, it does matter, because that was the same situation in WWE for all those years. And it matters because I don't like seeing people get wasted, and I want to be able to enjoy this fucking thing. Like, that's what we're here for.
Well,
we can talk about the numbers we fucking want. I don't want to care. I don't want to care. I want to be able to be foremost being like, I really enjoy this thing. It's adding to the things I enjoy in my life. Not just, it's fine because they're doing whatever numbers, to watch this guy waste his career or not do much of it, or, just find it permanently frustrating,
Well, it's that thing of like, again, that belief that, AEW is going to change the world. It's not going to be, your talent and your ability to make them to move and to draw is going to be the thing that helps get you spots. It's not going to be whether or not the booker likes you. And I think that's unfortunately, we've seen that that's just not the case anymore in AEW and hasn't been for a while, right? Like
it's still, and I hold on to that. They hold on to like
they believe
thing.
it, and it's like Tony will see that this is a thing and he'll give this guy a spot. Like not, like Tony likes what he likes. He has his guys. He wants to see guys that he wants. I'm sure that, whatever happens in another year or two, there'll be somebody from WWE who'll be coming in as a hot free agent or whatever, and yada yada, and somebody else will lose a spot again. Like
he thinks of it like a sports team, doesn't he? He absolutely thinks of it like a sports team. You get free agents, you cut everybody, and I always say a lot of other people think of it as a TV show. So there's that natural thing, and all bookers have favourites. All people have, people they want to push.
I'm not saying,
but you've got to manage that. You've got to manage that, and you still got to, But yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one to have all the arguments as to why something should happen sound like what people argued against for so long. But they've done it now. So we'll see. We'll use that Dave Meltzer thing. We'll see what happens in 6 months. We'll see what happens in 6 months. Because
again,
that'll
you and
be
I would love to be wrong.
I would love to be wrong. I would love to not have to read fucking a million Twitter posts and things in a year's time saying, you know what, they really should have done that. Like I see every time when I see it, like CM Punk shouldn't have beat Hangman Page in like 2022. It's like I fucking told you then. Like now I have to read it, and it's not just about because he flipped down the company. It was like because it was the wrong decision. Yeah, it was. But you, in hindsight, now you look at it, I want to see that again. So you have to make this work now. You have to find a way to build up this Strickland-Danielson thing, so Strickland isn't just an afterthought, and this thing isn't the coldest thing out of all the major programs. And saying it's Bryan Danielson, he's a great wrestler, they're all going to go nuts for it. It's not the answer. There needs to be more than that, and there needs to be more to protect Strickland as well. So, and I'm sure, for him it's a huge honour to be in the main event at Wembley, and I'm sure he'd have no issues to Bryan Danielson because the way respect works in wrestling, I'm sure that's absolutely the case. But there needs to be a future investment there. You want to make this guy into somebody. He's still in that formation period, so you have to get that right. And you need to get this Paige Strickland thing right, because so many people are still invested in it and are still thinking that you will. And if you fuck that one up, maybe there's always breaking points. There's different ones. And I always say, if you're not comfortable watching everything at the moment, go watch something else. And a lot of people are. This is a good time. This is a good time if you're frustrated or you're not enjoying it for any of the reasons that we talked about. And we talked about all the reasons, and we're not just here to bash them, but it's to explain to things that other people just aren't explaining because they're just too busy trying to justify something that even they're not 100% sure on. But there's plenty of things to go and watch in a moment. G1 is opening weekend. This past weekend. Interestingly enough, so they changed around their order, so they moved the opening days to Osaka rather than Sapporo, which is the traditional opening towns. Put Sapporo into the house show tour a few weeks ago, and the opening day was 4177, which is the biggest opening day since 2017. Isn't that weird? The biggest opening G1 day since 2017 is this year. Topped off with Shingo and Naito in Osaka, and today was much weaker. They did 2545, which is a little bit down from the second midday that they did last year with a Naito main event, but that still means that they are up for their Osaka dates and they are up for the opening weekend. So their tour planning, I had to look through the some of the ticket sales and the bits and pieces, and it's kind of hard to judge what those numbers will be. There's no massive kind of quick sellout, so we'll see how that goes. But it looks like their tour planning will allow them to be up again on this tour, considering all the talent they've lost. And I think the format works much better. I think everyone's enjoying the first 2 days much more than what they did with the 4-group block format in the last few years. Takeshita being in there is a revelation to have him. He does feel like he should be a New Japan wrestler, I'm sorry. Anyone that pisses off. But you look at the kind of the main event field in AEW and the kind of chances he gets and the stop-start pushing, and you look at the natural environment in New Japan and you think, God, he could literally just rise to the top here just like that. He's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had a great match with Tsuji yesterday. I haven't had a chance to catch up with Peter Pan yet, so I'll see what that match was like today on there, and then he's back in action on Tuesday in Hiroshima. And then there's here's my thing to get me cancelled, right? Okay, here you go. Guess which match, right? I'll just tell you. The match I most enjoyed this weekend in terms of outperforming expectation.
Oh, I know. I guarantee it's fucking evil.
It was Evil and Gabe Kidd, and I don't know what to do with myself, mate. My Evil and Gabe Kidd. And
Time
Gabe Kidd
comes
was
for us all.
Yeah, and Gabe Kidd was really good in the babyface role, and I've seen him work babyface from when he came through Nottingham, Derby area, and he was always really good at it. But obviously, since he started this kind of maniac character, we kind of haven't seen it. But I thought he was great working kind of the more the babyface style. I thought it was the best Evil match of the year. I was like, what the fuck is going on? I'm watching this guy, and this is great. And there's been other performances as well. Yuya Uemura started pretty well. Finlay started pretty well, although every time he barks or tries to sound threatening, I still think he just sounds hilarious, and he just shouldn't do it. But if you are struggling with other companies, it's a good time to check in. You've got the Stardom Grand Prix, we've got the M1 featuring NXT's favourite wrestlers as WWE try to secure their, firm up their Beamer deal. They're actually in WWE in this coming weekend. They are in Japan. One show in Osaka and 2 at Ryogoku. One is sold out. I haven't checked recently the status of the other one. But and then they have Marufuji going across to do commentary for Beamer and be a guest at SummerSlam. So that relationship, and on top of sending 2 NXT guys to the N1 and the recent AJ Styles appearance is there. We'll see what happens to Noah. We all know how this ends. But for them, there's also that perspective of this antitrust thing going on. It makes sense currently for them to keep their relationships going, which means, we were wrong because we thought they'd just dump it after Forbidden Door. But I think there's numerous reasons to do that. And with NXT, it's still providing them ratings. The Joe Hendry stuff is providing ratings, and while that continues, I'm sure this relationship will continue. So, we were wrong on that. But I can see the reasons why. But there's plenty of things to watch. Summer Princess was yesterday. That was good. I quite enjoyed that. We are going to get you to watching TJPW at some point.
Oh my god!
I'm going to bring some glow sticks. You can do it.
I'm going to have to lose some kind of bet or something. I sense it coming.
Yeah, but there's plenty of other things to watch. So Ibushi's back in DDT as well.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Peter Pan. Another show that was up 700 on last year. So there are there's some signs in Japan that if you're looking for something different, you can head back across there. One last question, because I've forgotten it.
I thought you hit all of them.
Oh, can you do the one right at the bottom? Because
Yep.
Cool.
Okay. This is from our friend of the podcast, Brandon Candia. Brandon wants to know, based on a discussion in the Discord, my question for the next podcast is, what are ways AEW can be hip and take things from pop culture that isn't badly acted melodrama that you both would like to see? I think they mean that or he means that the badly acted melodrama is not what we want to see.
Is that just like NXT?
Yeah. Although, you know what? I've been watching a lot of reality television lately, so I enjoy some badly acted melodrama.
Fair play.
I don't know that I'm the person to answer this question, as I think I am the least hip person possibly on the face of the universe. You may be the second least hip person. We are white women who watch wrestling. I'm not sure how hip we could possibly be with that.
I don't think I'm hip in any particular way whatsoever.
I do think that like I said, I think the things that I would like the most is for them forgetting things they could take from pop culture. I think that having people who are like, the RJ Cities, the Will Washingtons, mix those people in with some folks who could probably use a little bit of help in terms of motivation. And I think you probably get a lot more interesting promos, interesting programs than you would otherwise. But I understand that's difficult, and it's hard to get people to do things they don't want to do.
My big thing that they should take from pop culture is not actually something that they should do on screen. I think there's, what Swerve does in the way he incorporates pop culture is really useful. But this company was built on kind of catching on with trends and using different mediums to communicate with its audience. And we talk about that regression all the time, and they need to do more of that. They used to use platforms like TikTok more. They need to be more control of that, Instagram, all that sort of thing. Be doing kind of the Q&As and stuff on these platforms, using all them things. God, I see Noah talent doing that more than I do AEW talent. So, I think that's, in terms of engagement with that younger base, that they don't do enough of that sort of engagement. No. I don't think it's more about bringing things from pop culture or kind of thing. I think it's using the mediums that are so important to pop culture and making yourself part of that. I think that's where I see that.
Well, especially because if it's not genuine and it's not authentic, it always comes across as weird.
Yeah, people can tell, right? But you have to find different ways to communicate in that way, because we all do it now. I can spend an hour just messing about on Instagram, watching people walk from one end of the country to another, or one part of the world to another, or watching Neil the Seal. You ever seen Neil the Seal?
I have not.
Neil the Seal lives in Australia. He just comes and sits around in people's gardens and eats fence posts.
I have seen Neil the Seal on TikTok. They're always going Neil, what the hell?
Yeah,
yes,
Neil.
I'm lying. I have seen that.
So you have to find little ways of kind of getting engagement in terms of into your product that gets people invested into the characters. Because the key to that for me is that it's not about the brand. It's about the investment into those characters and then people wanting to see what happens with them and with those wrestlers. So I think that's how you need to kind of use that. But it's about, it's the mediums that kind of generate pop culture now, rather than the traditional mediums of TV or newspaper. We don't have that now. We live in this world that's beyond that, and that's why we get so much kind of what's the word?
Polarization?
That, and you've got that kind of it's like all in different pieces now. You consume things like we don't consume as like a monolith anymore. We don't just all watch the same thing on TV and then that's how you communicate your product. We all kind of pick and choose what we want. So you have to find the mediums that people do this by and then incorporate your product and your content into there. And I think they are really, really far behind on that. And that's, we have this thing where we still look at YouTube numbers, but I don't think YouTube's the medium that people are watching many clips in now. You can turn on Twitter and I can watch a full clip. I can turn on Instagram and watch a full clip. I can turn on TikTok. There was YouTube was the thing 6 years ago. I don't think YouTube, and you can look at WWE's numbers over the last year compared to the few years previously. You'll see a deterioration in those numbers for each clip. So that is not the median that people are getting to first. So we are behind in the way we analyse sometimes of these numbers. And we are behind, and that's some of where these companies are as well. So I think I've talked enough about that for now. But and I didn't pretend I was cool because that's just a failure.
That's not cool.
I am not cool. I don't care.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry, we're not cool. We can.
I'm never cool.
No, we're not gonna pretend we're cool, are we? No. Cool. All right. Have you?
It's cool that we're pretending we're not cool.
Yeah, I'm not cool. Fine. So I feel like I'm doing a little mini song there. I'm not cool. Anyway, right, we've been too long now because I'm rambling. I'm not being cool. Have you anything else before we close?
I did want to point out that I think for folks who are not in the U.S., important thing to note on the Janel Grant case is that it's currently being handled by the Department of Justice, which will be impacted by the election. So, obviously, yeah. So it's very difficult to believe that a Donald Trump Department of Justice would continue to pursue this case, although, you never know. But that is something that Yeah, if there's a change in administration and a change in parties, there'll be a change in priority of what you prosecute. So something to be conscious of as you look at coverage of this moving forward, especially given that Linda McMahon was a cabinet secretary for Donald Trump in his first administration. Yep.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay.
Sorry to end on a downer, everybody.
Okay. No worries. Yeah, it's an important note, and it's, for most people outside the US, it's probably insane that the legal system is under basically political control, but it's as it is, so there we are. Crazy.
We think it's fucked up too.
Yeah, we've just installed an attorney general that's like separate from any politician. So, whatever. Okay, it's too much politics. That's all anyone's going to read for the next 2 days before this comes out, right? Okay. So this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. We are proud members of the Social Suplex Podcasting Network. You can find all their great podcasts over at their website and also on all your favourite platforms. Listen to One Nation Radio, Keeping It Strong Style, Imp's WWE Adventure, Wrestling Out with Chris Fings, Tunnel Talk with our amazing podcast producer Leah. We love you, Leah. I always get lost when I do that. And AEW Match Guide, which if you want to hear me actually be nice about something and be happy, you can... So Sam invited me to talk about my favourite singles match in AEW of the Jon Moxley Adam Page at Revolution of 2022, where we talk about all the build, we talk about the promos, we talk about some stuff that maybe you may not have heard before, and then we talk about the great stuff in that match. And I thought it was really, really good, and he's incredible for how he puts all that stuff together and his length of knowledge. He outnoted me, Sarah. He outnoted me, yeah, by about 300 words. I was like, what the fuck? This never happens. I've got too much OCD for this, come on. But yeah, so if you do want to listen to that, you can catch up on that as well. You can find us on Twitter. At Trish and Sarah is the podcast Twitter. You can find Sarah at Sarah Graps. You can find me at Trish Spears 48. I am a little bit quiet, but I will... respond if you ask. You can also join us on the Discord, Social Suplex Discord, where you can ask us anything. Send us pictures, I don't know, whatever you want to do, like pictures of TJPW wrestlers, we get a lot of that. What else do we get? I don't know. But no, lots going on at the moment, especially with so many tournaments and things going on. We've got a lot of people that are really into lots of different things, and that's kind of cool because you can kind of bounce around from...
topic to
topic, and company to company. So especially with this G1, it's a good time to be in a Discord environment for sure. So yes. There is that. So we will back in 2 weeks' time. No surprises. Sorry, guys. We're back in 2 weeks' time. So until then, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And this has been our podcast. Thank you for listening.